Greetings, my lovelies. This is Blake here, and welcome to my review of WWE SummerSlam 2015. So this is going to be a strange video for me to make. If you haven't noticed, I'm wearing these gloves. I believe I have a pretty bad case of eczema, but whatever it is, it's causing my skin to get really inflamed, and it's keeping me up at night. And like today, when I was planning on filming this, I just practically passed out for like 3 hours. And I feel like crap right now. So if I sound off throughout the duration of this video, that is why. So I was not expecting a lot from this SummerSlam. It seemed like everything that was being revealed about it just was turning me off. I did not like the idea that it was going to be 4 hours long. I thought the match card was kind of unimpressive, and it took place a day after NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. Now, if you have not read my written review of NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, go ahead and do so, because I don't plan on doing a vlog on the NXT specials at this time. There's just not enough for me to say. But it was an exceptional show. It had awesome matches. But the way it was paced just kept me interested the entire time. I never got bored. It came down to not only the match card itself, but the placement of the match card. You know, it starts off with two good matches that were almost destined to be good but not great. But, you know, they get you excited for the rest of the show, but then it slows down a little bit in the middle with some okay matches, you know, decent enough to watch to where you're not losing interest, but not to the point where you're completely excited. And then it just goes all out for the final two, and those are the matches that really stick with you in the long run. And by the end of the show, you're completely satisfied, but you're not lethargic, you're not burned out. And one of the big problems with WWE's running times, you know, whether it's Raw or these various pay-per-views, is that they just always seem to go on for too long. They always place the matches in certain areas to where it just sort of deflates your enthusiasm. And 4 hours is just way too long to do a wrestling show, especially if you watched NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, because when you think about it, you're watching, I don't know how long that was, 2-3 hours worth the first night, 4 hours the next, and then you have Raw the following night. It's just, you know, overexposure. But let me bring up my notes and I'll discuss what I thought on all these feuds and matches. So as a whole, SummerSlam wasn't bad. It actually ended up being better than what I was expecting, but I can't really say I liked it in its entirety. There are some really good matches on this card, and there aren't any really bad matches on this card. It's just, once again, the pacing is all off. It seemed like WWE was experimenting with certain ideas, and whether they paid off or not ultimately comes down to you. I respect the ambition surrounding this pay-per-view, but it often annoyed me, or, you know, I was getting burned out. I was getting pretty tired throughout the duration of the show, and it wasn't just, you know, towards the ending, even though that's when it kind of hit the hardest, but throughout the entirety of SummerSlam, you know, I was constantly drifting in and out. So it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't particularly good either. So we start off with Sheamus versus Randy Orton. I missed the pre-show, so if there were any pre-show matches, I'm sure R-Truth would have been there somewhere, probably fighting Bo Dallas, since that's kind of a feud on Main Event and Superstars. I don't know anything about that, and I have no real desire to check it out, but the first official match was Sheamus versus Randy Orton, and the same problems I had with their feud going into Battleground I had here. The writers just aren't really doing anything to make this exciting. It's just, you know, they kind of dislike each other, so they're constantly fighting each other. But I think people are sick and tired of seeing Sheamus and Orton feud together. They've apparently done it many times in the past. And if I'm already bored of it, I can't imagine what longtime viewers who have, followed these guys throughout their entire careers, would feel. Like what they should have done was at least try what they did with Ambrose versus Harper, where there was a certain amount of epicness surrounding it, where like anything could happen. These guys were really unpredictable. But even though I don't think they really succeeded with that feud, they could have done something similar here. But instead, it's just generic stuff. And it got really bad that one Raw where Randy Orton won the triple threat match and then had a title shot against Seth Rollins, and then Sheamus tried to cash in. It just made everybody look horrible and stupid and weak. It completely got on my nerves. And why is it that the referee always seems confused when somebody wants to cash in their Money in the Bank contract? That's becoming a pet peeve of mine, but the timing was all off, and it just, once again, made everybody look bad. But otherwise, there are no stakes, there's no reason to care, and the match itself was pretty subpar. Some people did not like their match at Battleground, but I thought it was fine. It was, a fast-paced match. I thought their styles worked well off each other. There was nothing groundbreaking or memorable, but it was a solid matchup. Here, though, it just was really generic. It felt like they were phoning it in. I was just completely disinterested. Well, I don't want to say from beginning to end, because when Sheamus kind of interrupts the match to cut a promo, that was a little interesting, but, that's like 2 seconds, and then afterwards it just becomes something that I would expect to see on Raw or SmackDown. There was one cool spot where Sheamus pulled himself up on the turnbuckle using his upper body strength. That was pretty impressive, and then he ends up getting Orton's DDT. I liked that, and I appreciated that they finally had Sheamus go over, considering we've already endured a weak Money in the Bank contract holder with Seth Rollins. Yeah, they need to make Sheamus stronger in presentation, and I did like how he picked up the victory here. But, it just wasn't that great of a match. The crowd was so invested, they started chanting for NXT characters at times. It wasn't a total, revolt, such as when, Randy Orton fought John Cena during the Royal Rumble. But it probably should have been, because I thought the Cena versus Orton match was actually a lot better than this one. So it was a pretty weak way to start things. And then afterwards, it was the Tag Team Championship match. The Primetime Players versus the New Day versus Los Matadores versus the Lucha Dragons. Now, unfortunately, Hulu doesn't show the majority of this storyline. I can go a full week and they won't have any tag team matches on either SmackDown or Raw. Or then the next week, they'll be on both shows. You just never know. Why are the Los Matadores here? Why do they always seem to find themselves in these matches? I mean, they're not bad workers, but they're not over with the crowds. El Torito kind of is, but they don't really use him very well. Lucha Dragons, I get. If it was the Ascension, even that would have made more sense, because at least you have 2 heel teams and 2 face teams, and the Ascension actually is kind of being built up on Main Event and Superstars by beating, the tag teams of 2 solo competitors, like I think one was Jack Swagger and Fandango. But at least they're picking up some victories. I very rarely see Los Matadores win. But in terms of the writing, there's not a whole lot to say. I still feel like the New Day should not have lost their championship belts to Primetime Players at that time they did. I believe that was WrestleMania. I could be wrong about that. But actually, it couldn't have been WrestleMania, because I think it was actually Money in the Bank. But my memory is all fuzzy, and it wasn't like Money in the Bank was a particularly good pay-per-view either. But I think the New Day just they worked so well as the champions, and I thought WWE did a good job at making them feel important. They were getting involved in other people's storylines, and even the main storylines at times. And once the primetime players won, it's like, okay, I thought they were a good tag team too, but they didn't really do anything with them as the champions. They were just kind of your generic title holders where, they're not going to get involved in anybody else's feuds. They're just going to only concern themselves with what's going on in their division. And I think it would have meant more for them if they had won the championship at this pay-per-view, while at the same time, giving the New Day a lot more credibility. I think titles tend to change a bit too quickly in the WWE right now. I don't know if it's the same with TNA. NXT, it's hard to judge that because there aren't many opportunities for title changes in NXT since they don't have monthly pay-per-views, so I'm not going to count that. But that's where I feel the storyline could have been better. But this was a good, fun match, not a classic. There were some good spots. There were also some sloppy spots. It's nice to see Sin Cara going back to his roots. But there were a lot of cool moments. My favorite part, oddly, was when Darren Young had a confrontation with, I think it was Kalisto, and they're just both trying to hit each other, and they're both quick enough to avoid, and they have like that pause where they're kind of like sizing each other up, and the crowd really responded. That was a cool bit. And there were some like real hardcore spots, like when Big E spears Darren Young through the ropes. I would not be surprised if Darren Young got hurt because that looked brutal. Hopefully he didn't, but it was a fast-paced match. Everybody got their moment to shine. The New Day is just so entertaining. They show so much personality. And was it just me, or did the crowd actually give them a babyface reception? I could have sworn at times I was hearing New Day and New Day rocks chants, which was weird. I hope WWE doesn't turn them to babyfaces. The New Day, they work perfectly well as entertaining heels. And that would be kind of ruined if they become the good guys. But yeah, the match was fine. I feel like I've seen this kind of matchup too many times before. But from what I hear, the Dudley Boys have returned. I haven't watched the newest Raw yet. So that's going to be the next program, the New Day versus the Dudley Boys. That should be interesting. That'll be different because I'm kind of tired of seeing New Day fight all of these teams. And I'm tired of seeing them fight all of these teams together. So yeah, I almost wish this was the match that started off the show. It would have been a much better way to get me interested and excited for the rest of the program, whereas Sheamus versus Orton just sort of made me concerned because I was like, shit, there's over 3.5 hours of this left. After that, we had Dolph Ziggler versus Rusev. Now, I don't know if I've talked about this feud in previous videos, but for a long time, this was the worst thing happening on television in the WWE. I hated all of this love triangle nonsense. Ziggler and Lana are supposed to be the baby faces, but they did a lot of things that I thought were heelish. Like, yeah, Rusev's not particularly sympathetic. He's being kind of a creeper, but there's something awkward of seeing these two torment a guy who's obviously crippled at that time. And Lana and Ziggler have no chemistry whatsoever. I don't buy them as a romantic couple for a moment, no matter how hard they try to force it down our throats. And Lana, she just seems so bland as a babyface. Like, I was kind of getting tired of her as a heel because it seemed like she was saying the same thing over and over again, but it's like, I kind of regret thinking that because she's just far more boring as, the positive role model. And it makes no sense that she's saying, oh, Rusev was this controlling bastard, when what we saw on previous shows indicated that she was the one controlling Rusev. That's why, she did that thing where she waved her hand, and that would cause him to drop the accolade. Now, it would be kind of interesting if they claimed that, yeah, she was the one in control, but she was doing it to control his, dark side. Like, when we saw Rusev throughout the first half of, his career and since going to the main roster, he often acted like the baby face, and you could maybe attribute that to Lana, and then the more and more he fell out of her control, that's when he started showing his ugly side. But WWE doesn't want you to think that hard. But I will admit that it started to get tolerable because they started making Rusev and Summer much, much more villainous. And I think they're doing a great job at being that. I'm not a big Summer Rae fan, but she does play this part well. Whereas Ziggler and Lana are still incredibly boring, but there were enough decent moments to come out of this as it came closer to SummerSlam to where I could say this feud was tolerable. The match, unfortunately, was not very good. It wasn't bad. I shouldn't get that impression. The match itself, throughout most of it, was okay. It was disappointing because I expect more out of Ziggler, because for all the problems I have with Ziggler, I think he's a bland personality, and I think he has no sense of wrestling psychology. He usually delivers when it comes to fast-paced matchups. I'm very rarely bored by the matches he's in, even if I'm paying more attention to the person he's wrestling. And in this case, Rusev does show some diversity, as an in-ring performer. He does some new stuff, but the pacing, once again, it just kind of feels slow. It kind of feels lethargic. I didn't find this to be interesting for the most part. And then the ending pissed me off. It's a double count out. And that just felt like a cop-out. I know that WWE had kind of booked themselves in an awkward position. On one hand, it seems like they're more interested in Rusev's career than they are in Ziggler's. On the other, though, Ziggler is hot off of his return. And it would just be a bad time to make him lose. That would, in its own way, be very unsatisfying. I don't think either should have gone over the other. Really, what they probably should have done was make it a tag team match, with Ziggler and Lana versus Rusev and Summer Rae. That may have been horrible in its own right, but that may have just been the better way to go. Now, that would create other problems because this card has perhaps too many tag team matchups, but this ending was not the right way to go. It just kind of left me irritated. Throughout most of it, I was like, this is alright, but then that ending just made everything that preceded it feel horrible. So that's kind of surprising. I actually liked Ziggler and Rusev's previous matches, I think during the build-up to the last year's Survivor Series. There was some decent psychology there, and you kind of felt like Ziggler was the underdog and Rusev was this big monster, and you were really rooting for Ziggler to overcome these odds, but then unfortunately Rusev just proved to be too much. If they had done something similar here, except, give an indication that maybe Ziggler could have won and had Rusev play dirty, I maybe would have cared, but unfortunately it seemed like Ziggler had quite a bit of offensive going into this, and he got some, dirty tricks of his own. Once again, reminding me why I don't think Ziggler is not that great of a babyface. It's just that Rusev is being portrayed as a lot worse, so I'm willing to suspend my disbelief there. This was not a good match. Also, Lana, once again, seems like she'd be more comfortable playing the heel. A few times she does this very heelish scream that would have made sense if she was on, Rusev's side and she was the villainess. But once again, she's, the good girl. So everything about this match I thought was kind of badly planned, and the good parts weren't enough to redeem the bad parts of it. The fourth match is Neville and Stephen Amell versus King Barrett and Stardust. So, the Neville vs. Stardust feud, I liked how they were presenting it as some sort of comic book story. I liked when they'd show clips of it. They'd frame it as if it was panels of a comic book. That was pretty creative. I like the idea. I just kind of feel it's too small on scale, and Stardust is too over the top as to be taken seriously as a potential supervillain. Like, yeah, those kinds of characters were often very campy, but they were also very sinister. They did things to remind you that, yeah, these guys are dangerous, and they needed to have something like, I don't know, where Stardust kidnaps a bunch of fans. That may have been too extreme, but I really wish this feud had some ambition about it. Instead, it's just Neville, or it's Stardust goofing off. Neville, of course, is not an interesting personality, but he has delivered some amazing matches. I loved his the match he had with Seth Rollins for the World Heavyweight Championship. That was pretty phenomenal. So it's like, I want to like this feud, but I'm not really sure I can totally embrace it. And then when they got Amell, the Green Arrow, he handled himself well. Like, when he first showed up, I was worried that it was going to be a disaster, but he had a few cool moments, and I liked how he stood up to Triple H. So it's like, okay, them bringing him in, I could tolerate this. And then Barrett got involved for some reason. This made no sense. However, I really do think that Stardust and Barrett have pretty good chemistry, and I think they should form their own tag team, because it's not like WWE is doing anything with them as singles competitors, so maybe they could rebuild their careers through that. The match itself, mediocre. It seemed like they were building up to Amell, him getting in on the action. Like, it starts off with Neville and Barrett, they clash, but then they immediately break that up, and then Barrett tags in Stardust, who wants Amell to get into the ring, and so they do that. But then it's like they're building up, and it just goes on way too long. I'm like, this isn't right for such a long pay-per-view. I'm getting bored, and they haven't even started fighting yet. But then the action happens, and he doesn't do bad. He's not a wrestler, but he is athletic. I had some issues with his selling. Like, when he take hits, I don't know, it didn't seem like he was responding to each hit as much as he was just treating all of the different kicks, like when he's trapped in the corner, as a single kick. But still, he was much better than he could have been. And I definitely didn't mind his presence, because this is just a big gimmick. For a celebrity angle, not bad. God, I forgot to talk about Jon Stewart. Well, I'll get to that later. But my main issue with this was that it ends very anticlimactically. I was surprised how short this match was. I figured Neville would carry most of it, and then Amell would have the hot tag and kick a lot of ass, and then that would lead to Neville finishing it and taking the victory. But instead, it's Neville who is the hot tag, and so that was weird. But Amell has this cool spot where he jumps off the turnbuckle onto Barrett and Stardust, who are outside of the ring, and then Neville finishes it off with his red arrow. It just seemed short and anticlimactic, and so by the time it was over, I was just like, I really didn't need this. I expected more, and I'm not really sure I should have expected more, considering Amell is not a professional wrestler. But it wasn't the disaster I feared it would be, so yeah, you get that. Amell worked hard, and the match itself was not bad, so I could live with it. It just, once again, for a 4-hour-long pay-per-view, this kind of match really was not necessary. It just feels like it's padding even though it is in many ways probably one of the more important matches on the card since they are bringing in this celebrity. The Intercontinental Championship match. God, I'm sure I talked about this in my last video. I've never cared for this storyline. In my opinion, it's too early for Ryback to be getting in these triple threat matches. And the booking has been very strange because since Ryback returned, he's just dominated everybody. I don't think the Big Show or the Miz have ever gotten the upper hand. The Miz has been treated like a joke throughout most of it. I don't think he had any times where he even came across like a real threat. Big Show, like him and Ryback would clash, and sometimes those clashes would be intense, but they almost always ended with Ryback on top. And so, like, I'm thinking, does that mean that the Miz or Big Show will win this match? Will they win the belt already? But they didn't, so I guess they're just like really working hard on putting Ryback over. But I kind of feel that's diminishing the credibility of both the Miz and Big Show. In my opinion, they should have maybe did something where, the Giant and the Miz, they do get the upper hand throughout most of the build-up, so you really feel like Ryback has to overcome the odds. Maybe even the Miz and Big Show will form an alliance of some sort. I think that would have been a lot better. But really, this wasn't a bad match. It wasn't the pace killer I think we all feared it would be. Is it great? No, but it is much better than I thought anybody figured it would be. My only real complaint is that I hated how the commentators were underselling whenever somebody would kick out of a finisher. It's like the Big Show choke slams. I don't remember who he choke slammed. I think he choke slammed Ryback onto the Miz or something like that. And Ryback kicks out, and it's like the commentators treat this as if it's not that big of a deal. I'm pretty sure he even landed his KO punch at one point, and that didn't work either. The Miz gets his finisher, the skull-crushing finale, but then it doesn't work. I think Big Show kicked out of Ryback's shell-shocked even. But it's like the commentators don't seem all that impressed. So that was annoying, but I did think the storytelling, the psychology in this match was generally pretty good. It's pretty much, the Giant and Ryback are constantly trying to one-up each other, while at the same time the Miz is the Vulture, kind of prowling in the background. He wants to steal that win, and it was, like I said, this was a solid match. Everybody worked hard. I think all three competitors knew nobody was expecting anything from them, so they decided to, go all out. Big Show showed some awesome spots. That reminds me that he's so underappreciated by the people who keep chanting, "Please retire." But he never steals the thunder from Ryback, who still looks the best coming out of this, and that's how it should be. And then the Miz, he plays his role really well. The Miz, I think, has in many ways the most entertaining personality of these three guys. But, each served a purpose. Do I want to see a rematch? No. Do I want to see this feud continue in any way, shape, or form? No. If Ryback beats both Big Show and Miz, then you're not going to be able to sell me on a Big Show versus Miz, or a Ryback versus Miz, or a Ryback versus Big Show match for I think it's Night of Champions is the one that's coming up. But so it's not bad, but at the same time, once again, for a show that's 4 hours long, you need a faster pace than this. And even though this wasn't a boring match, I think it was fairly fast considering the three performers involved. But it's not enough to totally make up for the fact that you're sitting down and watching this much wrestling. There are matches that are coming up that do move fast enough, that are intense enough for to overcome the running time shortcomings, but this one was not. So not bad, but not great. Bray Wyatt and Luke Harper versus Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose. The feud lost all of my interest once Bray stopped harassing Roman Reigns' daughter, and then it just became kind of a generic "I don't like you, you don't like me" storyline. They bring in Harper and Ambrose, and it's like still something feels missing. I'm not just referring to the fact that Roman and Ambrose are missing Rollins, and Bray and Harper are missing Rowan. It just when they feuded both as the Wyatt family and the Shield in early 2014, these teams were white hot. They were the biggest of their class, and since then they just lost so much momentum. They don't feel as important as they were, last year. So it just there's nothing about this that could get me invested. It felt so small in scale. And the match itself, it's okay. Throughout most of it, I was like, yeah, I can't really complain, but at the same time, none of this is blowing me away. Part of the problem is that the crowd turned on Roman Reigns again, not quite as badly as they did like in the Royal Rumble, but the boos were noticeable, and it just made everything sort of awkward. But even in terms of like action, the only parts that really stayed with me was like Ambrose took a beating in this match, and that was pretty hard to watch. But otherwise, it's very standard stuff you could have easily seen on Raw. But it's not bad. It's not slow. It's just I'm watching it kind of dispassionately throughout most of it. Nothing is really jumping out at me. Nothing is going to last within my memory. And the fact that the crowd turned on Reigns just, I don't know, made it kind of weird and unpleasant to sit through. So not terrible, but once again, the placement in this overly long pay-per-view card, it's just hard to get interested. And by this point, I'm kind of getting a little wary. I kind of want things to hurry up. And then this one was the World Heavyweight Championship versus the United States Heavyweight Championship. John Cena versus Seth Rollins. And when I figured that this was going to happen, I was like, no, I don't want to see John Cena be the champion again. But at the same time, I'm tired of seeing Seth Rollins as the champion. So it's like a lose-lose situation. And then, Seth Rollins broke John Cena's nose. So John Cena wasn't able to cut any real promos. They couldn't really advance the storyline. They relied exclusively on Seth Rollins. And it seemed like every week it was just the same shit over and over again. And I like Seth Rollins. He's an excellent in-ring worker. He's good on the mic, but I don't think he has the charisma to carry a storyline on his own. Bray Wyatt, to his credit, he actually did have the charisma to do that when he was feuding with The Undertaker. But even then, that wasn't as prominent as the Seth Rollins-John Cena storyline. So I just was not interested at all. And the fact that this wasn't going to be the main event just kind of buried both titles, in my opinion. And that... Okay, the World Heavyweight Champion versus the United States Champion. Whoever wins gets both belts. That's a big deal. It doesn't happen very often. So you'd think that would be the main event, but nope, because Brock Lesnar and Undertaker have their match, that's going to be the main event. And not only is this not the main event, it's in the middle of the freaking card. Never before has either of these belts felt, or actually I shouldn't say either of these belts, but the World Heavyweight Championship never felt so irrelevant. But then, much to my surprise, this match was pretty awesome. It starts off slow, and I'm like, oh my god, this is never going to get going, isn't it? But that actually ends up working in this match's favor, because the slow pacing makes the second half, where both performers are going all out, feel that much more exciting and intense. And holy shit, Seth Rollins' credibility was almost completely redeemed by this match. Because, in previous matches, he's always been played dirty, but it always seemed like other people were gift wrapping the victories for him, and Rollins never really seemed that strong even during these matches. But here it's like Seth Rollins was not only doing his usual, high impact spots, he was also showing off incredible physical strength that you don't see from him very often. And he was dominant. He was taking it to Cena, who was bringing it right back. And I felt like these guys were equal competitors, and either guy could have won. In contrast to, Seth Rollins versus Randy Orton. It seemed like Randy Orton was the definite superior, and Seth Rollins needed to be rescued. I think it was like the four-way match between Reigns, Ambrose, and Orton. Rollins felt like the underdog who needed help in order to come out on top. When Rollins feuded with Ambrose, that was pretty competitive, but Ambrose doesn't really feel like he's main event material at that time. He is mostly jobbed to the more important people, so it's like it doesn't really mean anything. And then, Lesnar just kicked his ass. But no, this was very competitive and very intense and exciting, and they're just constantly topping each other in terms of providing spots. I'm looking at my notes. So it's just an epic, epic, fun match. And then the ending happened, and I wasn't too thrilled with Jon Stewart hosting SummerSlam. I don't think that works usually. I don't like these celebrity guest hosts, and I thought the opening segment, at least the parts I saw, weren't especially funny or thrilling. They were just kind of odd and awkward. And I thought his backstage segments were just awkward and not particularly amusing. And then he comes out, and immediately I know what's going to happen. Because at first, they're playing into the previous feud between him and Rollins. He's going to hit Rollins. But then he pauses and, does he want to hit Cena? Why? And then ultimately he hits Cena. Now, the reason why this didn't fully piss me off and ruin the entire match, much like the ending of the Ziggler vs. Rusev match, is, even though Rollins got help, it still is ambiguous as to who would have won. Both men were down. And then, it's not like, Rollins knocked, or Stewart knocked Cena out. No, he hit him with a chair, then, gave it to Rollins, who pedigreed him. So Rollins technically did get the victory himself. But it was just why? It was kind of silly. It would have been better, really, if, Stewart's about to hit Rollins, only for him to turn around and hit Cena. It wouldn't have made any sense. Maybe they explained that this last Raw now. But that would have been better. So the ending wasn't great, but it didn't ruin the entirety of the match for me. And this was a good enough match where it would have made a great main event. Now the problem is that perhaps it's too good because subsequent matches are going to feel inferior in comparison. Worse, I feel like the pay-per-view has experienced its climax. So now, exhaustion is really kicking in. I'm really beginning to feel lethargic, and there's still, 3 matches to go. And the first one is the Diva Battle. And oh my god, I've hated the Divas. Well, I shouldn't say I hated the Divas Revolution. The match quality has picked up. The Divas do feel more important than they've ever had, at least since I started watching wrestling. More time has been dedicated to them. And I do like how the actual wrestlers are getting more time than the models pretending to be wrestlers. So it's I'm perfectly okay with seeing Summer Rae play the manager heel. But, if she got into the title scene, I would not like that one bit. And then the Bellas, they get a lot of crap, but I think they're passable enough to where, I could accept them in the position they've been given. But it is nice seeing them take on new and different people. Unfortunately, the way they went about it was just dumb. Why is Stephanie the one who introduces the divas from NXT? That makes no sense. Stephanie is the villain. She's not supposed to be making it hard for the Bellas, who last we saw were sympathetic to the Authority, and they were allies. So it just makes no sense. And they keep calling it the Revolution. Really, is it truly a revolution when the authority figure is the one who brings the revolution in. That doesn't make sense to me. If anything, they should be calling it the Divas Civil War. That would also sound really cool and would make a lot more sense. But, there were no stakes to this battle either. It's not like whoever won gets a shot at the Divas Championship. And yeah, that's another thing too, is they're obviously trying to make sure that Nikki gets or beats AJ's record, but that's sort of undermined with they're not even having her defend the freaking championship for this match. So it's like, why should I care? Yeah, all three teams are fighting, but that's just it. There's no payoff to any of these victories that I know of. Now, they might reveal on Raw that, because Paige's team got the victory, then they might be the ones to get a shot against Nikki. We'll just have to see. But I did not like the idea of it at all. And then Team Bad was eliminated first, and that bugged me too, because I actually am very interested in seeing Nikki as the women's champion taking on Sasha Banks as the NXT women's champion. That would actually be a really cool matchup, and they actually gave us that matchup, and it was horrible on Raw, in which they undermined Sasha Banks, her belt. I don't even think she brought it to the match, so it wasn't like it meant anything. Even though Sasha Banks picked up the win, it just seemed like such a dumb booking decision on the part of the WWE. But, to be fair, I have heard that maybe Sasha Banks injured herself during the previous, during her match at TakeOver Brooklyn. And that was a phenomenal match, by the way. That was the best match of the night, in my opinion. So I don't mind her taking it easy if that is the case. But when they got taken out, it was just kind of anticlimactic. And that's another thing, too, is they keep showing these video packages of, Sasha Banks saying that she only works with the best. And then she says, Naomi and Tamina. And I'm like, when was the last time either of them really had their own victory? Naomi had her chance to contend for the belt, but she lost and she became a jobber right afterwards, albeit of the more credible variety. I haven't ever seen Tamina win. I since coming back into wrestling, when that's the first time I saw her, she's yet to pick up her own victory. She barely even has her own matches. So that's weird writing there. And the Bellas lost to Paige's team. Okay. But the match, it was fine. It was not slow. It wasn't boring. There were some sloppy spots, yeah, but it never got tedious. It was acceptable. But once again, coming off right after that Cena match, it just seems so small and insignificant in comparison. But at the same time, it's so fast-paced and chaotic that it doesn't even really make a good breather. And usually this is where you put a match where we could relax. We don't have to invest ourselves completely. It's just, we're getting the breather. But this match did not really give us that. It's too fast for that. I think this actually would have been better being the show opener, and they could have put Orton versus Sheamus here, and that would have made a more efficient breather. Maybe they could have shortened it too while they're at it. So once again, the placement of these matches on this card, it's just kind of a train wreck. These matches aren't complementing each other at all, even if the single matches or the individual matches are fine. Afterwards, we had Cesaro versus Kevin Owens. Man, I really wish Kevin Owens beat Cena, because it seemed like he was getting built up to be this awesome badass, this big dominant force in the WWE, but now he just kind of feels like another guy. And that's my biggest problem with Cena right now. It's that he keeps cutting off heels at the legs. Now, granted, he didn't beat Rollins yet, so maybe Rollins is the attention is just kind of shifting onto Rollins as the dominant heel, even though that contradicts everything we've seen going up into this. But like Rusev, he was getting built up to be this big, massive force, and then he loses to Cena, and now he's struggling to defeat Ziggler, who he would have squashed at a certain time, or just a couple of months ago, really. And now Kevin Owens is suffering the same problem. He doesn't quite feel quite as intimidating as he was before. And Cesaro, as much as I love Cesaro, booking has not been kind to him. So I feel like Kevin Owens is being demoted by going from Cena to Cesaro. And we all knew Kevin Owens would win. And the match we figured would be really good. And it was. Unfortunately, I could not fully appreciate it because this was when the long running time really started kicking in. I was struggling with drifting off. I was so bored. And that was really just what it came down to. It's not this match's fault. This match in itself was actually really cool. There was a lot of great moments where both men could show off, their abilities. Cesaro gets to show off his strength, and Kevin Owens gets to show off his agility. And I was surprised how hard Owens worked because, he probably took a beating during his last match with Finn Balor. Another great match on NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. But here, he definitely took some hardcore bumps. The match itself was really good. It's just bad placement. It's by now it's hard to pay attention because I'm getting so burnt out on this pay-per-view that even an exceptional match isn't going to draw me back in. Plus, like I said, the booking to me was kind of off. I would have much rathered Kevin Owens enter a feud with Randy Orton immediately after his feud with Cena, because then at least I'll feel like Kevin Owens is still kind of in the spotlight because Randy Orton is one of the bigger stars. He's a much bigger star than Cesaro, even if Cesaro was probably the more entertaining performer. And then maybe, granted, I don't want to see Cesaro over Sheamus either because there was a lot of that throughout 2014. But it still would have been better than just a half-assed Orton versus Sheamus feud. Good match. I recommend you watch it, even if you skip the rest of the pay-per-view. Then we have our main event, Lesnar versus Undertaker. And when Undertaker challenged Rollins, I was like, fuck no, I'm not interested in seeing this match. It was really bad at WrestleMania. And worse, Lesnar might accidentally kill The Undertaker, and I don't think anybody wants to see that. But I will concede that it immediately captured my interest. The Raw afterwards were there trying to fight, and then the entire locker room has to hold them back. And Lesnar's like, I'm going to kill you, and then Taker's like, you're going to have to. Okay, they actually made that really badass. And I was like, okay, I'm now interested in seeing this match, even if it's probably not going to be very good. So they had their match. And I'm surprised how freaking good this was. I'd say Cena versus Rollins was better. And in some ways, I might even say, Cesaro versus Owens was better on a technical level, but they did a phenomenal job at bringing me back in after I was exhausted. I was tired. I was just done with this pay-per-view, even before Cesaro and Owens had their match. And then Taker and Lesnar brought me back in. The drama was so intense. You really felt like Lesnar wanted to hurt Taker out of vengeance, and Taker just wanted to avenge himself. And there was so much emotional content behind every punch. I didn't see it as professional wrestling. I saw it as two very dangerous people trying to kill each other. And Undertaker was taking some very heavy bumps, and so was Lesnar, and Taker made Undertaker bleed. And because I think they kind of knew that this is a long pay-per-view, they need to keep things moving. They kept the pacing really fast. There was no dull moments. Is it a technical classic? No, but they made it seem it was a brutal match that had just enough flash to it to where you could overlook that most of it probably is just these guys hitting each other. I was really impressed, and there were just so many moments where this match worked on its audience through psychology, but at the same time it's offering different stuff that I just completely marked out. I loved when Taker tombstoned Lesnar, and then they're both kind of on the ground because they're hurt. And Lesnar sits up, and then he looks at Taker and starts laughing, and it's like, oh man, it's badass right there. And then Taker does his own, sit up straight, and then he starts laughing too. And it's not like Lesnar suddenly gets that horrified look on his face, sort of like when Bray Wyatt and Taker had kind of a similar showdown. But no, Lesnar's still laughing, and they're just laughing, and you kind of get the impression that they're enjoying themselves at this point, and I really liked that. And then it gets to the ending, and the ending was, it's stupid, but it may work out for the best. What happens is Lesnar makes Taker tap out, except the referee didn't see it in time. The person in charge of the bell does, so he rings the bell, so the referee's like, what are you doing? I didn't call that. And I'm thinking, oh my god, that is really dumb. That's very contrived, because that's just what you do. I've never seen that finish before. It may have happened, I just never have seen it. And then while Lesnar and Heyman are kind of confused, Taker low blows him from behind and then gets him in his own submission hold, and Lesnar can't get out, and so he just gives a defiant middle finger. And I was like, okay, that's, even though he's probably going to lose now, that is incredibly badass too. And then he passes out. He doesn't tap out, he passes out. So in a way, it's like both men got something. On one hand, Taker gave Lesnar his first real defeat, at least since 2014, but at the same time, he did tap out. And you don't see that happen very often. So they're obviously setting up a third match. I don't like these endings that were... There was too many controversial finishes in this pay-per-view, in my opinion. And the fact that, if this was the only one, maybe I would have been okay with it. But I don't like it so much. But at the same time, I am willing to keep an open mind. Maybe based on where the storyline goes, the finish will be worth it in the long run. We'll just have to see. So, overall, I'd say definitely watch Lesnar vs. Undertaker. Definitely watch Cena vs. Rollins. Maybe even watch Cesaro vs. Owens. And if you care about any of the other performers, if you want to spend that time, go ahead. It's just, those were some bright spots in a very bloated pay-per-view that's just too long for its own good. The placement on this card could have been so much better. Kevin Owens versus Cesaro probably should have been one of the very first matches back when you are fully awake and fully well ready to give your attention to what is happening on the screen. Rollins versus Cena probably should have taken place right after or right before Taker versus Lesnar, or at least one match before. Maybe have, I don't know, Orton versus Sheamus in between them. They could have done that a lot better. This is just a good example of why pacing is important, and that's where SummerSlam fails. The pacing just felt off throughout most of it, even when it was delivering some awesome stuff. And this is in total contradiction with the NXT TakeOver Brooklyn, where the pacing was the most exceptional thing about it. So it's like you can't help but compare the two, and yeah, NXT delivered the much better show. But, this was better than some of the other shows I've seen this year. I thought it was better than the Elimination Chamber, Money in the Bank, Battleground, Royal Rumble. But it's still, as a whole, I cannot say SummerSlam is worth watching in its entirety. Not as bad as I thought, but I still thought it was a misguided pay-per-view. So that's really all I have to say. I did do a written review of this, if this went on too long for you, and which you've probably stopped watching already, so I don't even really need to plug that. But I did do a written version of this review, which you could read if you want, which includes all of my reviews of every single Raw, SmackDown, Main Event, and Superstars. So be sure to read that. Also read my NXT TakeOver Brooklyn review, which also includes all the shows, or the reviews of all the shows leading up to that program. In terms of written reviews for movies. I've done The Babadook, Star Wars Episode 1. Read those. I'm going to watch a movie tomorrow, and I'll do a vlog on it. I haven't decided what I'm going to do. If I end up seeing Sinister 2, that will also probably be my next written review. If not, my next will be Donnie Yen's Kung Fu Killer. So stay tuned there. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you guys later.